right? Good. A little bit. Good.
That's how.
I'm just trying to restart the computer.
See, today, it's gonna do that. See, yeah, you tell me, still, today. I'm worried. No. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
No, but I was looking for my people. Nope, okay. Thank you.
Do I need to post it?
I think they were coming in person, when we run away. Yeah, for the text message.
Last day.
When they show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were up there last night.
He's,
Aphasia does not affect my intelligence.
Andrew online.
He's coming in person.
Where's Andrew?
He said he's coming in person.
Oh.
I talked to him on phone.
She's already got him right there.
And then like the film and stuff is not anything yet. Mine is thought was- No, it's like, the whole, like, demo and then.
Good.
Like I said, I'll keep the shelter. Give you the pay. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to, it's in cost, but you don't have to like, you don't have to, you don't have to contract it out. We already got your insurance.
Just you know, when you fall off the ladder.
Meeting of the Board of Commissioners for the Town of North Wilkesboro is now in session. Please rise. Thank you. Heavenly Father of peace, we invite you to preside over this meeting, even if we have different opinions. Give us unity of spirit. Help us each to listen politely as others share their points of view. Help us to work as a unified team in combining ideas for a great outcome. Help us to work as a whole rather than individuals trying to promote their own agendas. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together in our shared mission. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Please place the flag at Chief Thornburg. Would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, sir. We have one addition, and that is item C1. Add that the request of the town attorney to approve the final lawsuit settlement document. So Debbie's got that she'll hand out to you briefly. And in the moments before we get to that one, if you'll just come through that settlement document. And if you have any questions, Daniel will be ready to ask those. So Debbie, if you could hand.
And we need to
And
pull
those
that out
out,
of the
please.
consent, we need to pull that out of the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. Well, and as a matter of fact, Commissioner Parsons, just looking at the consent agendas, I think we need to take those up individually tonight anyway. So C1, and we'll just call it a consent, but we'll talk about it on its own. And then Mayor, the other comment I'd like to make is that if we can be flexible with the order of the remaining items.
Sure.
We do have a guest joining us tonight for the park item. And I was hoping that perhaps when he joins us at 6, we can go directly to that item just so he can be done and have a good evening.
Sir.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the agenda with the noted changes.
Thank you. Need a second, please?
I get a second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Next up. Mark, go ahead, please.
I'm gonna hit this with you all, and it's not bad.
Okay, good, thank you.
I was sitting on 10th Street the other night, and in itself is showing age here, waiting for my granddaughter to come out plugging. And I looked around and I thought, I didn't know salon therapy was there. Who's got that boutique across the street? And I'm thinking, I've talked to some of you about this. We do nothing in this town to acknowledge new businesses, and we've got one sitting right here coming up tonight. And the bottom line is, we need to do something to say thank you to the businesses here in North Wilkesboro. Now, I'm gonna throw stuff out, you all can throw it in the trash or do whatever you want to do. Don't throw it on Meredith, I want her to do some park stuff. This goes to Crystal and Wilson and you all, okay?
Mhm.
Why can't you put some kind of, even a portable billboard at the quarters coming in? To say, you know, welcome new business to North Wilkesboro, whatever on it, and every 2 weeks, put a brand new business. Joe's Tires, 10th Street, we're glad to have you. You know, Susie's Dolls on 9th Street, welcome. Something, and an ad in the paper once a month. Get the people out in front of the business. Now, I know Chamber of Commerce used to do this and cut the ribbon and
Yeah.
all that mess. A lot of these new businesses are not joining the chamber for whatever reason, that's their business. But that doesn't affect North Wilkesboro doing something about it. Put 3 or 4 businesses a month in the paper, new businesses, put the people in front of it, you know, list who they are, give a little bit about the business. Radio once a month. Now theoretically, Mark would be the one to do it since he's the mayor, but he's busy too. So if you all took turns twice a year, you'd be on the radio once a month for a couple of minutes, take 2 or 3 of these new business people with you. Let them tell the world who you are, what they do. Facebook and web page are great, but not everybody does that stuff. And we need to tell the businesses in North Wilkesboro, we appreciate them being here. Egads, folks, we're getting a Speedway. You know, we're not getting Ford Motor Company in here. And this would be a fantastic thing for people coming into town to say, oh, but the town really likes these people. You know, they really making us feel welcome. What do? Nothing. Now, it's in your ballpark, you all come up with a solution.
Thank you, Martha. Good
I
idea.
got a comment.
Go ahead.
One thing I've been thinking about since the retreat, because we talked about marketing, but particularly marketing things like you're talking about inside, like events we're having in new businesses. What if we consider doing some sort of billboard down at the marketplace area, if we could, Meredith, that maybe was even a digital billboard that marketed our upcoming events, and maybe when we had new businesses, and maybe even town business or news? Is that a possibility? Yes, I just tossed that.
Well, that's a good idea, but we need to add to it. I mean, we can't just put it down there because not everybody's gonna see it down there.
Well, it could go somewhere else, but it also, I'm with you, it needs to go in conjunction with, I like those phone calls that Larry South used to do on Fridays. Those were good.
Yeah, why don't we put something up here on this park? I don't know who put the sign up, you were beautiful, I don't know what it means, whatever. But Wilkesboro's got that gorgeous chandelier in town, it's got that big park now. We need to do something, have a reception once a year for all the new businesses, or every 6 months. Come to town hall and have punch and cookies. Something to show the people we're glad they're here.
I agree.
You're right. Thank you, Martha. You're out. Next speaker is Mr. Benesh. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Okay, you have 5 minutes, sir.
I was gonna pass this,
Yeah, sure.
so this is in regards to the Smith Park, work here, and I think the guy is coming, I'll talk to, on email, but I just wanted to bring up an addition I think would be beneficial for the park, and it's the skate park that, is currently there now, and we've, the one in Wilkesboro just got tore down, and, I grew up on F Street, I live on 9th Street now, just bought a house, married, have a kid, I work for Lowe's corporate, but I've grew up skateboarding. I've done it since I was 8 years old. I was here when both skate parks opened. I enjoyed using both of them. But I think it's time to renovate it and make it look good and get a really nice one in there. And I've been talking to a company in California for about the past 3 months, and that's where these images come from here. They build concretes all over the United States. They've had a couple in Charlotte, a couple in Durham, and I was talking to him, and he was kind of giving me a layout of what we could do here and some different options we had. But, currently we have a 5,000 square foot skate park at Smoot Park, and we're looking for anywhere around these would be 7,000 to 9,000 square foot. And just some of the benefits, they're nice to look at. They make these parks, look like pieces of art. It's not just a, skate park. They can do stuff. They can add shrubs, plants, all kinds of stuff. They can add picnic tables, all different things to make it look really nice. And then, some stuff that Wilkes has just never had access to, and something that, Wilkesboro doesn't have. They've got the bike course, they've got the pickleball, they've got all these different things, and nobody has a skate park. And nobody has a skate park like this in surrounding areas. Boone is growing their skate community. They would come down. We have a lot of people that would be interested in this being built. And then the main thing is too, you build a park like this, you're going to keep skaters off the streets. And I think the police could agree that it would take a lot of pressure off them having to kick people off and cause a lot less damage if we build parks. The issue right now, see with the parks we have, is it doesn't reflect like what the downtown would look like. There's no stairs, there's no rails, there's not certain things that skaters like to use on the streets at these skate parks. So even though that park is there, they're still going out to the streets. They don't have access to these things they're looking for. So if we could build a park that kind of featured some of these things, I think it would keep them off the street. And like I said, I think it'd make the town a lot happier. So people aren't having to say, get off my property. And, I have a kid, he's 8 months old. I want him to learn how to skateboard and snowboard. And I think, with skateboarding being something that just was introduced into the Olympics this year, we have the Olympics coming to the US in 2028. Skateboarding is going to be in that. It's becoming a lot more of a mainstream sport. And you've got companies like Amazon, Sony, mainstream sports companies like Nike and Adidas that are getting into skateboarding. It's not just this, sport that people see as like a hoodlum sport anymore. It's becoming mainstream, and families like me and a couple others I've talked to the community want their kids to have a place to go. I want to go with my kids, safe place where I can teach them how to skate. And I think it'd just be awesome for the new Smoot Park edition.
Interesting you said that on today's agenda, you're aware,
Yeah,
we're redoing Smoot Park.
yeah,
And in the plans, they're going to increase the size.
yeah.
Of the
Yeah, so and that's kind of what, I kind of been thinking about this for a while, and I saw that, and I talked to Andrew, he said that was part of the plan here, so I'd be definitely interested in helping it any way I could. I can give you guys my information, but I'd be more than welcome to help, or, just give any ideas or help get this moving along. Like I said, I've got the contact for the company that builds these, and we can all get in contact. And here on the back 2 pages, he kind of shows like where it would lay according to the skate park we have now and what they would look like. But like I said, willing to help at all. I mean, any way I can to get this looking.
Mr. Palmer has your contact.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I have a copy?
Yeah, absolutely. You can have one.
How is this different than the skate park we already have?
So the one we have now is like modular units, and it's made of kind of like a fiber material and metal. And this one would be complete concrete. And then the rails and stuff would be metal, but this would be all the ramps and all the boxes and everything. The bowls is something, like I said, something that we just don't have around here. It would be all concrete. It's a lot more sturdy. It also would hold up better for bikes. This is not just for skateboarders. This is for BMXers, rollerbladers, scooters, anything. But be a lot more solid that way. And like I said, it just looks better. Those metal ones, they start to rust. If you look at Smoot Park now, I mean, it's falling apart. And then kids now are taking stuff from other places and bringing it down there because it's falling apart to try to fix it themselves. And it's just, this would stay, it's all one big piece. So,
Good job.
yeah, thank you very much. And also, just to- if you don't mind, just to add to that too, I agree with what you're saying there. And I have a page I made on Facebook called What's Up Wilkes. And I kind of focus toward promoting new businesses and things that are going on in town. But I agree, I mean, it would be nice to get some other things, and everybody's on Facebook, but it's something there we're trying to focus on, promoting new businesses and letting people have the opportunity to post in there and say what they have going on. So, everybody should check that out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next is Jason Sargent. Mr. Sargent.
Yes, sir. So we're here just to kind of talk about the signage and the text amendment. We are opening up a new business, so it kind of ties into all this down here on West East Street. Our business is called Meat Sweats. We're gonna offer custom processing and a full retail store of all fresh meat. So we're just here to try to voice our opinion on how the signage ordinances are very restrictive. There's a lot of wordage and verbiage in there that's hard to understand and hard to promote a new business in this area. There's nothing like degrading of the property value, if you will, for signages that 99% of people are trying to put up. So we're just trying to look to change that a little bit. Excuse me. Change that text so that it says you can have a building sign on the side of your building, and so that when someone's driving by, you can see what that building is. With COVID and everything, the way the world's changing, there's not people that are just coming door to door and saying, hey, what's this business anymore? It's like a window shopper kind of thing. So we're just looking to be able to change that a little bit, be able to display our businesses' names a little bit easier, better, visible from the roads. Because another part of that verbiage is the right-of-way, distance off the right-of-ways. For a perfect example is a business like ours, to meet that requirement, now I have to put a podium monument sign in the middle of my parking lot.
Right.
Which then comes hazards of people driving into it, backing into it, losing out on those parking spaces if we did something around it for like greenery or whatever to help protect it. So it's just real restricted, and we're looking not necessarily to completely change it, but maybe loosen it up to have monument signs and building signs allowed.
Very good. Well put.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Sargent, did you have a?
There for item F. So we can talk more when we get to
Can we
it.
get out of that?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, we think that's actually on our.
I know, it's on our, yeah, you probably knew that too, yeah. Okay. Very good.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer the folks who are participating online an opportunity.
Yes,
And
sir.
so if you're interested, please raise your virtual hand and we'll give you the floor. All right, just to repeat, for those who are watching online and interested in participating in the public forum, please raise your virtual hand and we'll give you the floor. Hearing none, Mr. Mayor, I suppose we can move on.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Routine business, I guess, we're okay with meeting minutes, we've been in your packets. You want to do these individually?
Yes, sir. Please.
Need a motion, please, accept the meeting minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes as stated.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Second, thank you, Ms. Church. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Update the meeting calendar, that's pretty straightforward too, it's all in your packets. So need a motion, please, to.
Oh, excuse me, Mayor, so I actually have another,
Oh, I'm sorry.
two things to add to that. So,
Item B.
yes, sir. So the first is, we need to schedule our budget workshop. And my recommendation is that we cancel our April 5th regular meeting and hold the budget workshop later that week on the 8th, which is a Friday. An all-day session, kind of like we did with the retreat. But hold that workshop in lieu of our normal meeting that week. And so that's my recommendation for that. But if there are other dates that someone else would recommend, obviously we'll consider those. And then the other thing is March the 30th, the Great State of Wilkes Outdoor Action Plan Group would like to convene a joint meeting between you, the Wilkesboro Council, and the County Board of Commissioners to receive the outdoor action plan. And so the date that they are proposing for that is March the 30th. I don't know what day of the week that is. If someone could share what day of the week that is, that'd be helpful. At 4:30, location TBD, but probably the agricultural center. And Wednesday, okay, thank you. And so I think that's the date that the others have said works best for them. And so I'd like for us to agree to that date, but if that doesn't work for the majority of the board, we can go back to the table and try to negotiate another date. But of course, we have to advertise it just so we'll be in compliance with the law.
I don't have a problem with that. No. Bert and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so my recommendation then is to add March 30th, 4:30, and April 8th, 8:30 to 4.
Any questions or discussions?
Yeah, where we're gonna do the work for the budget meeting next.
Probably here.
Any other questions? Mr. Hooper, discussion on these days? If not,
I'll make a recommendation to add those to the calendar and approve the calendar as is.
thank you, Mr. Church. Thank you, Mr. Hall. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Item C, conflict of interest policy.
So, Mr. Mayor, this item was added to the agenda as a prerequisite to receive ARP funds. So the federal government is requiring that every entity that receives ARP funds have a conflict of interest policy, just so there'll be a check against folks personally enriching themselves with these stimulus dollars. We had these various provisions scattered about through our various policies, and we submitted that to them, but they said, might as well be safe and approve a comprehensive conflict of interest policy. So that's what that is. It's just the model policy they gave us, translated exactly for us.
Well, I did understand on this that each individual employee and or commissioner will need to sign one of these personally.
Yes, sir.
It's in everyone's, copies in everyone's packet. Susan read it. Is there any other questions or discussions?
No, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the conflict of interest policy.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Second, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Day. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we'll go to, is it C1?
Can we just sign this one, Wilson, and give it in to David?
Sure. C1 is the next one on the agenda, and that's the lawsuit settlement. So Danny, you have any comments to make on that one before they take action?
I do not. We worked over the past couple of weeks between the attorneys to craft this settlement agreement and release, and I believe it conforms with what the town has agreed to do to resolve the matter with the Catherine Barber Shelter. And so this agreement summarizes all the material terms of the settlement agreement. And if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions or discussion? I need a motion that the board approve the final settlement document between the shelter and the town.
I'll make a motion to approve this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Church. Your second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Day. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Is there any way we can always make sure we get stuff like this, so we have time to actually look at it? I don't really like signing anything or proving anything I have to look at.
We got that one, what, yesterday? I mean, it was not approved until yesterday, so. So,
Go ahead, Mr.
yes, sir. So it looks like our guest Brian is online.
Okay.
My manager's report's gonna take a while, so it's something we could do this item first. So Brian, if you're listening, I'm gonna promote you so that we can move to this new park item. But while he's being promoted, I just want to start us off with a few comments here. One of the documents we'll give you today is the master plan that Brian Meredith and Mary Elizabeth came up with, including an estimate of probable construction costs. And you'll see that it's quite significant. And so transforming Smoot Park is gonna be like eating an elephant, and we're gonna have to do it one bite at a time. You know, the gift from the hospital is gonna help us take our first few bites, but we're not gonna be able to finish the whole thing. But we're hungry and we want to keep on eating. And so we got to do some extra things to leverage the foundation's money and find new funding sources. So the first thing we need to do that is more time from the foundation to put together our grant and better align its schedule with the other funding sources that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So earlier this week, I sent them a letter asking for an extension to the deadline, and they've granted it. So our new deadline is May the 17th. And this is going to enable us to throw our hat into the ring for a second funding source, one you all heard of before, called PARTIF, or Part-A. And that stands for Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. So that's a state program endowed every year by the General Assembly that's intended to help enhance and maintain state and local parks throughout the state. We haven't applied for it in the last few years because it requires a dollar for dollar local match, and we haven't been able to afford that. But the hospital money can constitute our local match, and of course, we've got some money of our own in our savings account that we could spend on that this year too. So we're going to apply for that. We've actually got a visit scheduled with the representative for the program here next week, so staff will be meeting with her and getting some additional information on the program. And we'll talk about, in her opinion, which one of these projects on the list is the most likely to be funded by that program. That application is also due in May, so about the same time as the foundation application. And then finally, as I alluded to, we've got our own money to spend. And so perhaps what we can't do with the hospital and Part-A money, we fill in the gaps using our own. The new dates, the May dates, align with our budget deliberations. So you all will have the opportunity to decide, after you've heard and considered what our other needs are throughout the town, how much of our fund balance savings, if any, you want to contribute to this project. Okay, so with that said, there's a slight change in the action on today's agenda. We won't be asking you all to approve the master plan yet. We'll just be asking you to hear a presentation and give us some sense of what your priority projects are. It's listed as kind of a menu of things, so we can pick the one or two that are our highest priority and make those the focus of our grant applications in the months to come. So that's the kind of information we're hoping to get from you tonight. And then we'll bring this matter back to you in the months to come, and we need official action for this grant and the others. So I'm going to throw it to Meredith and Mary Elizabeth and Brian and have them walk you through the plan, how it was made, and get your thoughts on what the priority project should be. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be with you all tonight. I hope you can hear me adequately. Okay. And I think Wilson has the image of the master plan or concept plan that has been prepared for Smoot for your viewing. There it is. And Wilson, do I have control? Can they see my cursor?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think.
Okay. I mean, it's small. It's a small plan, so it's pretty easy for me to describe without actually pointing at things. And you all know this part very well. It became obvious to me during the course of my conversations with not only you all, but also with staff and residents of North Wilkesboro that this park is much loved. A lot of history here, a lot of personal experiences. Heard a lot of those during our engagement process. And so it became clear to me that this park holds a pretty special place in the hearts of many of the residents in the community. So I think walking you through this, probably just as easy to point to some of the major elements and talk about those, but did want to preface the tour, if you will, of the park by saying that we did have some significant and I think very meaningful engagement from the community, both online via survey online as well as an in-person meeting that we held. And the in-person meeting we held was great, was a great conversation. Having you all stop in that same day during the morning and the afternoon was also very beneficial. I think, initially diving into this project, it was initially really about the bathhouse to a large extent, and the skate park was sort of second. But through the conversation, other things became apparent and important as well. So I will begin with the bathhouse and the skate park, and also preface this by saying, we have not, did not really have, I'm not an architect, so I really didn't evaluate in detail the condition of the bathhouse. But as it was presented to us, the town wanted to consider two options. One is renovating the bathhouse, and one is removing and replacing the bathhouse. And this master plan or concept plan shows a replacement of the bathhouse. Accessibility concerns, I think energy concerns, appearance and aesthetic concerns are all there. So the master plan does show the removal of the existing bathhouse and replacement with a new bathhouse in the same location, more or less, preserving obviously the entire pool deck and the pools themselves, as well as the recently installed splash pad. There was a restroom building between the bathhouse and the large picnic pavilion, which is also being removed in this plan, so that bathrooms would be incorporated into the bathhouse, is our thought. There's another restroom building that was down towards the boat launch. We are also either recommending that building get replaced and become a maintenance building, or perhaps maintenance and storage, or perhaps the existing building can be renovated to accommodate that as well. So we are suggesting that the bathhouse get replaced. With regard to the skate park, this was something that we heard very strongly from the community about, that the popularity of it, the health and well-being benefits of the skate park, teenagers primarily, but not all teenagers, some older, some a little younger, the physical benefits of this, and giving them something to do that they're really passionate about. And I think that has other benefits as well. So we are suggesting that the skate park be expanded, basically doubled in size. And you can see the expansion to the north of the existing skate park into a little bit of that open space that exists between the skate park and Main Street. While we're over in that area, another sort of thing that we talked a lot about was just fitness in general. And there seemed to be an appetite for some additional fitness equipment and a fitness area for adults and well, all ages, but primarily, adults. So we have located adjacent to the existing skate park and the expansion, a fitness area where there could be various pieces of equipment for folks to work out on. In addition to that, while I'm talking about fitness, I am going to direct your eyes over to the other side of the plan, and you see the trail going down to the greenway. And one of the suggestions that we're making as part of this plan, and it would maybe continue down the greenway, is the installation of some fitness stations, so that folks walking or jogging along the greenway trail have an opportunity to stop and engage one of these fitness stations, do various different exercises and so on. There seemed to be a lot of support for that sort of activity as well. So I've covered, I think, the fitness aspects of things, both swimming, skate park, fitness areas for adults, and so on. I will add to that we have arranged, we've kept most of the existing walkways, but we've added to it, and we've arranged the walkways in such a way that there is a loop that's possible. And that's if you start at the bathhouse, you can go towards Main Street around around the skate park and the fitness area to the backside, and then come past our new restroom picnic shelter facility, which I'll talk about in a second, and then back to the existing shelters and back to the parking area. So there is a loop, and we feel like this loop can be achieved in an accessible fashion, that it can be made handicap accessible. A little bit of work to do from a grading standpoint back behind the area where the skate park would be expanded. But for the, we're still very confident that that loop could be made accessible. Currently, there really isn't a loop. There is the story walk, but it is by no means accessible, both from a material standpoint and a slope and gradient standpoint. So we have altered the walks slightly to create that loop. The next thing I want to talk about is the picnic pavilion itself, which was previously located where you see the word open space, adjacent to the parking lot and just to the right of the bathhouse. There was a lot of conversation about the condition of that structure as well. So the master plan is recommending a new picnic pavilion with restrooms that would serve the entire park. And that building is located to the right and pushed back to the right of the pool, and then pushed back towards the creek. One of the things I think that's beneficial about this location is it really, number one, puts the shelter within the confines of the park. So you have park all the way around the shelter rather than the pavilion being, pretty close and right up next to the parking lot. The second thing that I think it does is it enables us to create a central open space between the bathhouse and the existing picnic shelters, which can provide a place for flexible play, for throwing that ball or that frisbee or something of that nature. Just flexible open space, which seemed to be lacking in the existing configuration of the park. What this also does is it provides us a place to locate a playground between the new picnic pavilion and restrooms and the existing shelters. I think this is a huge improvement in that the existing playground was kind of behind the pool. So it really wasn't adjacent to anywhere for a parent to sit in the shade and keep an eye on their kids, maybe while doing something else. And what the location of this playground adjacent to the open space lends itself to is the ability to have that gathering, be in the picnic shelter, be preparing food, doing the picnic things, and still being able to see your children on the playground. In addition to that relationship, we've also located idea of small things like cornhole and horseshoes, which are out there now, also sort of adjacent to the playground and the large picnic pavilion. So that sort of activity is confined to that area, and it enables us to have that open space. Another thought back by the restroom building was the idea of connecting children to nature. And while there's not a lot of quote unquote nature at Smoot Park, you obviously have the river and the Greenway Trail, which is a great asset. But you see behind the restroom the notion of a nature deck. And basically what that is tucking a little deck just sort of inside the woods, not taking kids all the way down to the creek, but providing a place where there could be educational signage about the creek and that environment, and just giving them a place to sort of be more in nature than what's provided in the rest of the park. I'm going to move over to the right-hand side. I previously mentioned the conversion of the existing restroom building, possibly to a maintenance building down towards the basketball court. And that's we just have to look at that building, I think, in more detail to understand if it could in fact be used as a maintenance building, or whether it makes more sense to build a new maintenance and storage building in that location. The other thing on this side of the park that we recognized are a couple things. One is that there's a large gravel area between the basketball court and the picnic shelters, and that's the access down to the river access area for kayaks and canoes. And so we thought that there was, I think this, based on some of the outdoor recreation initiatives that are happening in Wilkes County and surrounding areas, we expect that this boat launch, kayak canoe launch might get more popular. So we thought, well, maybe it would be a good idea to sort of define more formally the parking area and the turnaround drop-off area. So we have done that between the existing basketball courts and the picnic shelters. By doing that, we also are able to give a little bit more green space back to the park side. Certainly, it provides parking for those who want to get on the basketball court and be close to it. And also gives folks a place to park after they've dropped off their kayak or canoe in the drop-off area. Adjacent to that new little parking area between the basketball court and the park, there's an entrance back to the treatment plant. And there was some discussion about the possibility of closing that entrance with regard to the fact that, there's a lot of large trucks that come through on Chestnut Street and basically come through the parking lot to get access back there. There is another way into the sewage treatment plant. So what this plan shows is the closing of that driveway to the treatment plant. Trucks would have to go the other way and come in the other entrance, but taking those large vehicles out of circulation next to the park, I think, will also be beneficial. While I'm over there, I also want to talk a little bit about the basketball court. A lot of history, a lot of folks talk to us about, the days that they've spent on the basketball court. I do think it's pretty popular. As you all probably are aware, the basketball court itself, those 4 courts are in the floodway of the river. You could never build that there today, given the environmental regulations. Much of the park is in the floodplain. So the point or the idea here is that we're not showing them immediately gone. We feel like that the basketball courts could remain for a while, but recognize that they will continue to, periodically they will get water on them. They will get flooded, and it will be tough to maintain those courts in a good playable condition. So the thought is that if such a time comes where the maintenance is just not smart, that would be a place that a multi-use field, just a turf field, could be located. Not artificial turf, but natural turf. It became clear in the conversations with the community that a portion of the Hispanic population particularly really doesn't have a place to play. I was told that they are playing soccer on tennis courts under the lights at night. So I do think that this would be a great place for a flexible multi-use space or field for that activity. When the time comes and the decision is made that maybe the basketball courts are just too much to maintain long term. The last thing I'm going to mention is if you come down Chestnut Street off of Main, there was a little bit of discussion about creating more of an identity or an entrance to the park. And we've done that by reconfiguring the park at the parking edge a little bit along the park, and then creating a couple islands and a true entryway into the park. So it could be demarcated with some signage, some monumentation that basically welcome visitors to Smoot Park, right there between Chestnut Street as it curves and the parking lot. I think that I've covered all the major elements. I am happy to address any questions that the commission has. And again, I want to thank you all for your time and your insight that afternoon when we were in town talking to everyone. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
So Mayor, Commissioner, I'd like to mention that while he was talking, we handed out another document that we just received today called the opinion of probable construction cost for each of those elements. And I just want to qualify that by saying those are order of magnitude figures. Obviously there's a lot of factors that go into play when you're figuring out the cost of various projects. So those are just to establish the sort of order of magnitude of each feature.
I have a question. How many of you know what was actually there in Smith Park? Not the tannery, what was actually there at the spot where Smith Park is now? It was all
Wilson.
houses. It was all houses. It wasn't the tannery itself, it was the houses. And what was it called? Tanner's Roost.
They were like little mill houses, right?
No, they were the big houses. The
Big
people-
house.
The big wigs of Tanner.
Was that the owners and management, their home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Called Tanner's Roost.
That's one. The flood, yeah. Yeah, flood.
Sorry, Brian, go ahead. You were saying something.
Well, no, I was just starting to say, I'm not sure I heard the question clearly.
Oh, it was a history lesson, really. That that area before was housing.
I'm sorry, it's still breaking up a little bit. I'm having a hard time hearing.
Go ahead. It wasn't. I mean, it was interesting for local people. The area there was housing for the owners, the management of the tannery, and the flood took all that away. Okay, we'll move ahead.
So if you all would just share your thoughts on Brian's presentation and on what projects you are interested in and what do you think we should pursue?
So, Wilson, what is the requirement for, I mean, we have our two pools and this splash pad. So what is the requirement? I mean, I understand our bathhouse is, you know, old and not in great shape, but is there some type of requirement as to what a bathhouse that supports this pool system? I mean, is there a state requirement? Is there a county, you know, because I'm gonna tell you something. That figure, and we need to do a lot of things to the park. But that one figure of rebuilding that bathhouse is scary. I mean, $1.1 million, you know, to build a bathhouse. I mean, what kind of bathhouse do we need?
What's encompasses that bathhouse?
So I'd like to have Nelson and Meredith comment on the needs of the bathhouse. I can say that if we start construction on any of it at all, even just to renovate it and gussy it up, we have to bring it up to ADA standards. And I just don't know if that's possible in this current configuration. So Meredith and Nelson, if you can add anything to that, please.
So you go ahead.
Well, yes, you would have to bring that ADA, and also, the bathhouse has to have showers.
Nelson, could you speak up, please? We can't hear you. Come up here.
The bathhouses have to have showers, ADA restrooms, and things like that for the pool. You come in and use the pool, you have to use the shower before we go into the pool.
Wilson, if I might, I can comment. I'd like to comment on the opinion of probable cause relative to the bathhouse as well as everything else. That's all right.
Yes, sir.
Did want to say to you all that those numbers on that opinion of probable cost are conservative. And what I mean by that is I think things could be done cheaper. But I didn't want to give you all an estimate that was low. You know, there's still some investigation work to do in terms of, you know, we're basing that off this master plan, and the combination of that plus the unpredictability of construction costs these days sort of positions us to be very conservative. Could it be done cheaper? I'm sure it could be. But I didn't want to put a number in front of you that was low. And also, if you look at the bottom of that sheet, there's also, to cover some of those things or to account for them, there's a 15% contingency in there too, which I think amounts to, but over $300,000. I just want to say that, you know, it's conservative. I wanted to go high instead of going low, just so that you're aware of that.
And I can, if I can add to the board's, for the board's edification, that we're also in the process of investigating what it would cost to repair the pool. As many of you all know, it's leaks significantly during the summer. And so we have hired a firm to come in and do an assessment of what it would cost to repair that pool and bring it up to maintenance standards.
Can our staff do any of these things like demolition or landscaping? Save money?
Yeah, probably. We can probably do some of it. Yes.
You might not have the equipment to do it.
We need folks to realize what vegetation's there, what trees are there, and to, you know, it needs to be consistent.
All right, so listen. I'm trying to get, first of all, we needed a master plan in place. That's made clear to us in order to start looking for funding, you know, because you gotta have some kind of plan. So from us, I mean, actually, Holly, can you give us some insights that you, because Holly, who is working with the foundation on this, can you give us some insights as to what the foundation's thinking is on all this?
The foundation, first of all, you're making applications to the foundation. And I think earlier it was said the money the hospital gives us, that's not solidified yet, right? Like you need to make application to it and you need to, you know, I think that is a big part of it. When we discussed making an application in March and then we decided to move it to June, it's to allow you all time to get your footing, right? Like now that you all have a master plan, you need to find, based on the scale of the master plan, which I still haven't really seen the scale of it yet. You guys are looking at it now. I think, you know, you're gonna have to find multiple funding sources. And I think Part F is probably a phenomenal one to go after. I think that you all should, it's hard because I'm on the planning board and I'm on the board of the Wilkes Medical Center Foundation. So I'm kind of like trying to wear two hats. I'm trying to be an advocate for the town, but then I also have to be a board member of the foundation and walk that line too. So as a planning board member, I think that we should pursue like private industry funding, like we should pursue businesses in our community for funding, because there are a lot of organizations in our community that do fund projects just like this one through their philanthropic arms. I think that you all, as far as the actual, I'm not sure, Michael, I'm not sure how you wanted me to address it.
Well, I mean, you know, like I said, you know, we need to try to figure out, you know, they need, the foundation needs some kind of idea of what direction we are going and how we're going to.
We need concrete answers. Yeah, we need a plan. We expect a well-formed application. And we expect, I expect y'all to know what you're asking us to fund and to have a plan as to how to make that project a reality.
Well, I mean, this number on this, and I know
See,
you
I haven't
said it
seen
was
that
generous, but this number on this is $3.1 million.
I think, I mean, I know that it's one of those things where I discussed with Andrew earlier that we both feel like this is a generational project, right? This has to be, this is a big project that's gonna make a big impact in our community. And as a board, you all just need to decide whether, as a town, you're ready to commit to that or not. There are funding streams out there for these types of projects. You might have to, I know that you're gonna be cooperating with a grant writer from the COG, I think, am I wrong?
That's correct.
Yeah, from the COG, which, I mean, they will be able to identify other revenue sources for you. I was a grant writer before I came to work with my family's business. Like, I feel like, and a fundraiser, I think that this is a possibility, but we do expect a concrete plan, and we do expect a concrete plan for funding it. What I think none of us, and Martha's on the board as well with me, I think what none of us want to see is, I always want to choose my words wisely when I'm on a Zoom call. That's being recorded. We don't want to see this turn into a splash pad, right? Like that was like drawn out over time. I think that that's a trigger for all of you, you know, and for a lot of people in the town. We, you know, if you all are going to commit to this, then it needs to be, in my opinion, a project that y'all commit to and make happen. And maybe you need to explore other funding revenue, like other funding streams before y'all commit to it. But we extended your deadline to June, as the foundation extended your deadline to June in an effort to make.
May 17th.
Well, May 17th, sorry. May 17th, the board meeting is in June, so that you all have an opportunity to make this a reality. Am I answering this correct? I mean, am I like filling you guys?
If
Yeah.
you're gonna commit to it, to do the whole thing, and you get funding elsewhere, and you want to apply to the hospital foundation board to do the bathhouse.
Right.
Then you could ask for 1.5 million, doesn't mean we're gonna get it to you, but you can ask,
You can
ask for that.
You can have, yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily a realistic approach right this second, but at the same time, I do think that I expect a well-rounded grant application. I do. I don't, and the narrative, so I was sent a narrative draft prior to, because your application, you know, originally we had thought that you guys were gonna apply in March. And when I received that narrative, just a lot of red flags pinged off for me. There were references to things that, like a 10-year plan to make this happen. Just several things that in my mind, I didn't think would be received well for any funder, right? Much less the Wilkes Medical Center Foundation.
You can have a 10-year plan, but don't present that to us.
Right.
We won't.
Right, and I mean, I think in general, like a 10-year plan for your park system is fine. But in 10 years, can you honestly say any of you will be sitting in your seats? So you can't make promises for 10 years, right?
My wife says no.
I tell you right now, that answer, no.
I don't.
One of us won't even be here.
So I think it would be a misstep to commit to a 10-year process in a grant application.
See,
And that's like one of the things that from a grant writing standpoint, you see, but from, you know, from this standpoint, you don't necessarily. And so that's why we collectively, and honestly, it was really more me than your staff, because your staff was really feeling like they need to make this happen. And I agree with that, but nobody wants anything half-baked, right? These are the money from the Wilkes Medical Center Foundation. It's dollars from the community, right? Like, and that holds a lot of responsibility in allocating it, because we want that money to go towards positive improvements in this community. And we don't want to pave a basketball court that's gonna get flooded in 2 years and is gonna be eroded away. And we don't wanna build a skate park that's gonna rust away. We wanna make an impact that's gonna last. And so that's probably, sorry, I feel like I'm going on. That's it.
I've got some comments, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, go ahead, Mr. Paul.
So anybody that knows me knows that this is important to me. Like Holly said, I believe this is a generational project for the town. What I mean by that is the investment that we do to Smoot Park will probably be a 25 maybe even 30, 40, 50-year investment, at least 25, but go look at it now. This is an investment that was made probably 50 years ago, still standing. And that's how important I think this is. I think that when people living here would appreciate it, people coming here expect it from communities. They expect, higher standards than we used to with this stuff. Some things that I would like to just point out that I think are important that were on the plan. And the thing with the basketball courts, I used to play there a lot. Matter of fact, Andy out there, we used to play probably 3 to 5 days a week. They paved that 10, 12 years ago, and it's already cracking up. I would support seeing that removed and maybe more parking for community to meet up with the outdoor action plan, or maybe a small soccer field. I would suggest that we consider, when we restripe the tennis courts, which we put in the budget last year, that we consider moving 2 basketball courts down there. Then we would be the only place in Wilkes County that had lighted basketball courts at night. Those courts down here, Memorial Park, are more visible driving by, which I think would be a little safer, so the cops could keep an eye on it. And I think just having a place where you can play basketball when it's getting dark outside would really attract some people to do that. And it could still be used for indoor soccer fields for people using it. I think having a walking trail down around there that's maintained well would be great for families to tie in with the greenway. I'm a little bit, as I look at this plan, wonder if we have enough parking on there. That's just a concern. I definitely think that we should consider approaching private funding, whether we have staff do that or whether we try to find a way to do it. But I think that we need to try to find the funds to make this happen. We as a town need to know what we're willing to invest in it and how all that will play in with like applying for a Part F grant like Wilson talked about. Anything else?
Please.
Just to echo what Andrew was saying, any funder is gonna wanna know that the town of North Wilkesboro has skin in this game. So any funder is gonna, if not require, strongly suggest that the Board of Commissioners invest money into this project, which I know you all are probably already planning to do, but I felt like that needs to be said out loud.
And another thing that's a possibility for some things, you could even have the community maybe have opportunities. If you go to the picnic shelters now, they've got little things on there where somebody donated the money to sponsor it. I think there's families and people here that would do that. I think I support shutting off that Spruce Street. I think it would help the aesthetics of the park and be safer. I think this is the only skate park in Wilkes County. If we don't have a skate park, we're gonna be down on Main Street. I saw a kid last year go down C Street, hit his head. I was there when it happened, and I don't know if that could ever be the same. Having them at the park is probably safer, and it's not gonna mess up our businesses, parking lots. One thing about the park, the skate park, and I'm not a skateboarder, but I know that one reason they like to go places downtown is because there's ledges, curbs and stuff that aren't the park, but we could incorporate that. We have the only pool in Wilkes County that's open to the public that I think there might be one of them brushies, but I think that this one is safe to say that statement. That's a real asset that really attracts people here. And I think the idea of an outdoor fitness station would be good because it's connected to the Greenway down there. I know that over by the Greenway in Wilkesboro behind the Y, they've got some pull-up stuff and dip machines. And I used to be a boxing coach, and I used to take my guys to places like that when they would run to exercise. And I think that would be worth investing in. And that's kind of my thoughts on it. But I would just encourage everybody to realize how important this is and what it would mean to the community and for the future of this town and for our county. And I think we need to find a way to make that happen. And that's how I feel. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Anyone else?
Yes, sure, and I agree with Mr. Park. There's a hope everybody in town is looking at us to do something about the park. If we don't do something, we're mud. So I think we need to commit ourselves to do this and do it. I support it 100%.
Thank you, Ms. Church.
Otis, I feel exactly like you do. We've talked and talked. We've walked around the park. We know what we see and we know how we need to fix it. And we've got a great plan. Now we just need to start figuring out how we're gonna pay for it.
Can COVID money fund any of that?
Hmm?
COVID. We got COVID money in the bank. Can we use that to fund any of it? It's healthy.
Perhaps, perhaps. Well, so the thing I think we need from the board tonight, based on Holly's comments, is which project would you like for us to focus on in our application to them? Because she said the current plan is too broad. We need to have a focused project to apply for their funds with. So of all these projects that are listed here today, and based on what you've heard from Holly, which would you like for us to focus on with them?
I personally would like more time to decide that.
Yeah, we agree, yeah, I would.
But also, I want to make sure that we're not just applying to Holly, that I think they're wanting to see a complete plan in town, and I think we need to get that. Is that fair to say that?
Yeah, I don't need you all to put, the Wilkes Medical Center Foundation doesn't need you all to focus in on what particular one portion you're gonna ask for tonight by any means. We just want a well-rounded project, and then when you come to us, you focused in on what you particular item you would want to fund. That definitely does not have to be decided tonight. I think moreover, what you all need to work on is how you're gonna bring this plan to reality in the next couple of months, like that's what, in my opinion. And I'm just one voice of the board.
Yes, sir, go ahead, Mr. Church.
I think we're all gonna do this. What I think we need to do is take it down and break it down in steps. Like we do the skateboard and the pool first. And just make ourselves a priority list, and we know everything's gotta go to EPA standards. So that's just something that is an ungiven thing. But I think if we take it like one section, write a grant up, find somebody and talk to them, how about help us with this? And just do one step at a time, but not make it a 10-year plan. We need to make it a 5-year plan.
And I just heard tonight that there's issue with their pool leak, correct?
It's been that ever since I've been here.
So, that is such a summer activity that those children in North Wilkesboro look forward to.
Wilson, when it comes to grant money, I mean, I don't know much about how it works, and I don't know if the rest of the board does either. Is this something that we can say, we're trying to fix our park, and we're fixing multiple projects at the same time and apply for it, or is it gonna have to be one thing at a time? If it has to happen one thing at a time, that's pretty demoralizing.
Well, the Part F grants for local governments are capped at 500,000. And so clearly we wouldn't be able to do the whole park with one Part F grant.
No, but we have their grants, the Part F grants, we have money that we could, if the board wanted to, put towards it, because we do have a surplus of money right now. And I think that it's totally reasonable to reach out to people in the community, to some of the bigger businesses, because I think people here care about the community and they want to see it nice. And I think there'd be people willing to invest. I really believe that. I said that about the mural. We need a sponsorship policy, and we never got the policy done, and we never got to ask. And this right here is probably easier to raise money than the mural.
Well, I know for a fact, when I was out campaigning, people told us we couldn't afford the speed bumps to go on the streets. They would buy them, and I got 5 names that told me they would invest the money to do it. And I know that people will invest, like they'll build a small picnic shelter, put your name and plan up, they'll do it in the community.
And Wilson, we can also break that target plan up into phases, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
I'm sorry. Ms. Campbell? Did you?
I'm going to say that Part F, kind of or like rewarded more points in your application if your proposed project provides more recreational assets. So like if you're providing 2 new recreational assets versus just 1, you get more points and therefore have a more competitive application.
Okay.
And I think when we meet with the regional representative next week, we're going to ask her specifically about how you can like match funding with Part F.
Very good.
Go ahead.
I see, first of all, as far as, I think, one thought about a way to do this, because there's quite a bit of demo And of course, once you start tearing it down, those are holes. I mean, those are eyesore holes during the period of time. The other thing too is, and it never occurred to me, but, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but and this
yeah.
thought right here. You know, okay, so skateboarders may not be, you know, a huge portion, but the thing is if I was pulling in off of Main and I saw a facility that looked like this as the first thing that you pulled into, I would be thoroughly impressed. I mean, that's, I mean, I'm not a skateboarder. Matter of fact, there's not enough pads and helmets for me to be a skateboarder.
Hey, you can
But,
come on.
I think trying to, if you're going to me, it would be easier if you concentrated on something that was aesthetically pleasing on the front end. Because once people begin to see something positive, I think it then becomes easier to sell the back end of it. Because the back end of it is going to be fairly expensive. I mean, but you start talking about demoing the bathhouse and that main shelter and some of those other things, you know, as long as you've got something right there at the front of it that is kind of like the jewel, I think that we can get through the period of time that it takes us to fund and build these other things that we have to tear down. So that's just my thought of, even if we couldn't go with his, I think including members of that community and stuff like that. This is a very impressive facility. And I know, and it's just like he said, one of the most watched events in the Summer Olympics last year was the skating. And so, and nothing personal, but I'd rather see your skateboarders down here at a facility like this than grinding my bench out in front of my store.
You know, I used to do it as a kid, and it annoys me to see it now, so, yeah, I agree.
So,
And these skateboards come by, and old lady walks out the door, bam, she's on the ground. I seen it almost happen twice in front of my shop.
so that's just my thoughts, Wilson, is
I
that,
agree
you know,
with
this
that.
would like, I
That thing,
think we need to
skateboard out there,
concentrate on
number one
something that's gonna be visually aesthetic to start with, but we can, until we get through this demo phase. That's my opinion.
Mr. Hoover, perhaps you come up with a list of priorities, distribute them to the board, have them marked, you know, that's what they, that simply be pretty simple.
For what it's worth, I think there's things we could spend money on that the community might be like, what are you doing? I don't think this is one of those things. I think
Nope.
that people would be glad and thankful for the investment. If we do it right and we don't drop the ball.
Yeah, Ms. Nick, go ahead.
I think one of the things about this project is, I mean, it's one of the main ways into downtown North Wilkesboro. And you can't do anything about what's on the right side of the road there, right? Those are private businesses, those are private homes. Like, you can encourage them to clean up and do what this and that. But if you put something really shiny on the left side of the road to draw people's attention, they're gonna be less focused on what's on the right. And I think as far as, I mean, if you talk to a school of government, one of the things that, you know, great small towns have great schools and great parks. And that's why this is so important to me personally. Like, I think as a community, when you start trying to sell it, people are gonna buy it. Like, and especially businesses in your community are gonna buy it, and they're gonna wanna be a part of making it great. I'm not.
I think, that, like for what Holly's saying, I think about this a lot. I think that your parks say a lot about who you are as a town or community. And I feel like that with a park like this, we could not only change the way that other people see our community when they come in that are new here, but I think we can change the way that people live here feel about their own community.
Right.
And build civic pride. And I think this is how you do it. Things like this, fixing the mural, you know, cleaning things up. And I just think it's hugely important.
It's all perception.
Anyone else? Before we move on, Ms. Bennett, thank you so much for your comments and your great advice. You too, Ms. Bennett. Yes.
All right, thank you, Brian.
Thank you all. Look forward to further conversation about this wonderful project for you all.
Let me get Brian off the screen here, if we're gonna need it for the next part. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to offer tonight was a briefing on the intake situation. This is, pardon the pun, a fluid process. The mayor and the board are out doing some advocacy with the other elected boards, so I appreciate that. Staff and I are getting info from the state. We are pulling information on the various options to feed to you all, so that you can use those while you're out in the community making your case. And so today I just want to give you an update and brief you on this topic. And I want to do that, Debbie, if you can hand out this sheet in two ways. First is to answer some of the specific questions that Commissioner Palmer's asked about the intake matter. And the second is to start reviewing the details of the watershed ordinances themselves, so that when you're out in the community making a case, you'll be smarter about what extension of those ordinances mean for the community. So Debbie's giving you a handout here. The first few pages of which are answers to Andrew's questions. The first question there was about the quantity of watershed that we have in Wilkes County. And so you can see there, we've pulled a chart of all the watersheds that currently exist in Wilkes County and their acreage. You can see that they come close to about 180,000 acres. Wilkes County total is 425,000 acres. So already a significant percentage of the county is covered in watershed. And the sort of unfortunate point to make about that is that only 2 of them are for us. The rest of them are for waters that feed other communities' water systems. The vast majority, of course, are the less restricted protected area. Only 700 acres are the more restrictive critical area. Okay, if you'll turn on to page 2, you'll see actually the effect that the critical area will have. This image, the green blob there, is the critical area of our proposed intake. And you can see how it touches a couple of North Wilkesboro properties over there off Willow Lane near West Park. But the vast majority of the area, the critical area touches is North Wilkesboro, or excuse me, Wilkesboro, including downtown Wilkesboro. And so I just wanted to present that information to you. Commissioner Palmer had a question about how many meters in town North Wilkesboro supplies to. The answer is 1,780. How many meters outside the city limits, but in Wilkes County? So that's a slightly more complicated answer. We provide water directly to 14, and then 4 wholesale meters. But the wholesale customers that draw from those 4 meters then provide to an additional 12,199 meters. I couldn't tell you how many people we provide because we don't know how many people live in each home that has a meter, but we supply to 12,199 additional meters outside the city limits for a grand total of 13,993 meters. So town of North Wilkesboro alone supplies water to nearly 1,400 meters. 14,000, excuse me, yes, you're right. And then the last page of your booklet there has a map that shows the water associations and approximately where they are on the map. And so it gives you a sense of the scale of the community that's covered by the water association. Now, I confess that on the map, it includes the one that we provide to, but also the ones that Wilkesboro provides to. But if you look at the ones sort of on the top of the page in the northern part of the county, those are the ones that we provide to. Our current daily capacity with our current intake is 4.2 million gallons a day. And this is set by the state, so that's all we're permitted to do. Our plant itself is probably physically capable of treating a little bit more than that. But we say that the limit of the plant is 4.2 million gallons a day because that's what we're permitted to do. The intake machine itself that is quoted as part of the project would have a 6 million gallon per day capacity. But we'd still only be treating 4.2 million gallons a day because we'd have to do some upgrades to the treatment plant as well in order to treat 6 million gallons a day. But we felt now that we better plan for the future and get a larger than what we need currently pump, just so we'll have the capacity for growth in the future. We don't know when the watershed ordinances were established. We think that it was originally in the 1990s, but the more important notion was updates in the 2010s to establish the special density allocation process that will go over here in a minute. So the last question was, is there a way to know how much has been developed within the watershed since the ordinances were established? I mean, not really. I would do that, pull permits, but there is one thing I wanted to share with the board, and that is, if you read the paper this week, you heard about a potential distribution center to be built just outside the Wilkesboro town limits on 421. That would have about 30 acres of impervious surface. It would be in the watershed, and it would require a special intensity allocation, which is what the county calls it. And that hasn't seemed to infringe upon that project. So we've got a special intensity allocation going on right now in practice. And I think that an observer would agree that it is not too onerous, and it's definitely not what's holding that project up. Okay, moving on. I want to draw your attention to this page. It's got two maps on it. The first map is the blue arrows pointing to where our proposed intake would be. It's off the greenway, just 100 yards or so downstream from the pedestrian bridge, the greenway pedestrian bridge.
So when you say downstream, is it towards Smith Park?
Yes. Yes. To the east of the bridge. And then the image at the bottom, the dark green sort of fingernail crescent shaped space there would be the acreage in which the watershed would need to be extended to accommodate our proposed intake.
This is mainly the Meridian Creek watershed, right?
Yes, sir. And if you look at it, I'll let you cast your own judgment, but if you look at the map, most of that property is sort of rugged and hilly and probably isn't going to support commercial or industrial development anyway. All right, moving on. So if you'll turn the page to the page with the bullets there, I just want to go over some of the distinctions between the three ordinances. Each jurisdiction has an ordinance, and they're very similar. They were all created based on the same model ordinance. But there are a few minor distinctions that I want to point out. The first is that Wilkes County's is the longest, because not only do they have to include our watershed and the Wilkesboro watershed in theirs, but these other three that I alluded to earlier that feed Taylorsville and Elkin and Statesville's water source. Wilkesboro's is actually short because they only have one watershed to protect, and it's their current Yadkin River watershed, which is a WS4, and that's the least restrictive of the classifications.
It's actually WS5.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I found out. But they said that they don't really exist anywhere, and they basically don't have many restrictions on them, but they're not very common.
Right.
But they did correct me, because I assumed that it was restricted.
Okay. All three ordinances have a process for waiving some of the restrictions, which I just alluded to earlier, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But the base regulations for each one are for residential development in the watershed, you can develop no more than 2 dwelling units per acre. So each single-family residential unit needs half an acre. Wilkesboro and Wilkes County's ordinances have a provision that if you don't have curb and gutter in your single-family neighborhood, it can be up to 3 dwelling units per acre. And the theory behind that is that if the water from rain can flow freely into the yard rather than down the street into the storm drain, that the yards will act as a kind of sponge and help filter out some of the contaminants that we don't want going in the drinking water source. And so curb and gutter, although beneficial in most cases, in this case, carry the pollutants into the river and therefore require more restrictions. And so no matter what happens, I would recommend that we perhaps reconsider that part of our ordinance and add that provision to ours as well. And then depending on the entity, they have a different body who hears the variances and who hears the requests for the density allocations. In our case, it's the planning board, Wilkes-Barre is the Board of Adjustment, and Wilkes County, one of the other. I can't remember. Okay, the next sort of important thing to remember is that all three ordinances set the base regulation on 24% built upon area. So if you're a non-single family residential, if you're multifamily, commercial, industrial, you're permitted to build on 24% of your property, unless you get a special density allocation, which we'll talk about later. Or in the case of Wilkes-Barre and Wilkes County, 36%, if you have those features that I just described. All right, I'm over to the last page. One point I want to make is that in the watershed, no use is expressly prohibited. Theoretically, you could build anything you wanted, including a landfill, even in the critical area, if you had certain measures in place to capture spills and other things that might pollute the river. Now, I don't think a landfill is going to break their back trying to get a density allocation to locate in the critical area. But theoretically, even there, they could locate there. So the notion that there are certain uses that are outright prohibited is just not true. Okay, now to the sort of important chapter, and that is the what Wilkes County calls a special intensity allocation, what we call special density allocation. You'll also hear this referred to as the 1070 or the 70-10 rule sometime. And that's because up to 10% of the acreage of the watershed can be developed beyond 24 or 36%, up to 70%. So that, let me say that one more time, because it's kind of complicated. But the total acreage of the watershed, so 174,000 acres, you can develop 10% of that, up to 10% of that, at 70% built upon area. And so in our case, that's about 240 acres. We've got 240 acres of land that's available to be developed at 70%. And we've got 24 developed in that way. So we've got a lot of capacity. We've got a lot of space in the cap. Neither Wilkes-Barre or Wilkes County have exact figures for us yet, but it's because they've got so much capacity and they're so far into the cap that they haven't really been tracking it all that closely. Wilkes County thinks they have thousands of acres available. Wilkes-Barre has 300. And so both jurisdictions have capacity to build denser developments, even in the watersheds.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
The 10% of the 70% can be, 10% can be built up to 70%.
Correct.
And under what WS level is that?
Well, there's a provision for all the WS levels, but in our case, it would be the WS4.
And we're assuming that the proposed watershed area will be a 4.
We're presuming that. I sent a map, I sent this very map with the blue arrow to our contact at the state earlier today, and I'm waiting to hear back from her confirming that it would be a WS4. Ms. Countess Elizabeth.
I spoke to the
Who did
lady,
you speak to?
I spoke to, maybe her at one point, but yesterday I spoke to the lady Julie and I asked her, that to her, and she said, she mentioned at High Rock Lake they were redoing something, but she didn't see the Yadkin or Wilkes County on there, so maybe we'll get good news on it.
So now there are different criteria you have to meet in order to get one of these special density allocations. And they're a little bit different depending on jurisdictions. Wilkesboro's and Wilkes counties actually have a point system. So if you have a landscape plan, you get X number of points. If you have a multi-story building, you get Y number of points, and so forth. Ours is a little bit different. We have 10 criteria, and if you include 5 of them, then you get the density allocation. But I just want to point out one thing, and that in both instances, no matter which way it's calculated, projects are eligible to get points towards this allocation for something that has nothing to do with environmental protection. And that is if they contribute to the tax base, contribute more than 200,000 to the tax base, they get a point. If they hire more than, I can't remember what it is, I want to say 5 or 10 people, they get some points. And so even though most of the things that they're asked to do to get those allocations are for environmental protection and to protect the water source, not all of them. And so those were designed intentionally to give economic development projects and projects that will bring some other benefit to the town a little bit of leeway when it comes to watershed regulations. So that's my briefing for today. I just wanted to talk about some of the details of the ordinance so that we all can be a little smarter about it. There are a couple of additional notes that I want to say based on what I found out from the state. And that is getting the watershed extended isn't the only requirement for a river reclassification. So there are some other things we're going to have to do even after we get commitment from the other jurisdictions to update the ordinance in order to get that reclass. And then once the reclass is done, it's not the only environmental requirement that the intake must meet. When we submit our concept to the state, they make sure that it's not harming the environment in any other way. And so this is but one obstacle that we'll have to get over before we can get our intake in the ground. But it is important. And it's one, of course, that requires the cooperation of our neighbors. So that's all I've got to provide to the board tonight. Meredith and I will be happy to answer what questions we can. If we can't answer it tonight, we'll follow up with you at another time.
Mary, I got a question for us. Okay.
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
If we were to have this proposed intake, it would be able to do 6 million gallons per day. Would we have to upgrade our plant to be able to do 6 million gallons a day?
Yes, sir.
With that being said, is there anything that we could do? First of all, if we kept the Reddy's intake operational as well, if in the future we need to grow beyond 6 million gallons a day, we had those 2 intakes, could we upgrade the plant to be able to expand beyond 6 million gallons a day? And we stay certified.
I presume so, yes, sir.
So theoretically, you could have more than 6 million gallons a day if the need is there.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what number it could go up to? 8
Yeah.
million?
Let me write that down. So
I think it would be whatever we would be willing to pay for the treatment.
Yeah. Well, the intakes.
And Michael's right, that's what you'd have to change. The treatment.
So I know that the big piece of infrastructure at the treatment plant that sort of sets our capacity is the finished water tub. I don't know exactly what it's called. Yeah, the whole tank. We'd need another one of those if we were to expand much beyond whatever it holds.
I think what we really need to do is concentrate on getting this done. After we get this done, then we can worry about the other side after we get this done.
But is it true, Mr. Hooper, that our current maximum demand is around 3.2 million a day in July?
So that's about average, yeah.
So we're-
Sometimes we'll peak higher than that on really, really hot days, but in general, in July, about this.
So we should be in good shape for quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So what I think is one of the big selling points is that by doing this, it would increase the water capacity for our whole county. And this is another generational project that, 50 years from now, or maybe even longer, will still be going on. So having that ability to go above 6 million, if you needed to, would be there. And I just want to state this, that I think that regulations and restrictions on building and water intake is probably a pretty safe assumption. They're not gonna get lighter as time moves forward. The cost is not gonna go down. And one other thing that I would like more info on, if there's any way to get it, is I know that Winston-Salem has rights to water coming out of the Yadkin. If they were to increase their demand in the future, what could that mean for Wilkes County and for North Wilkesboro?
That's information I can
Access for that.
provide that to.
I really appreciate you doing all this. This is great.
What is our process? What is our process to put this back on the county's plate?
Well, Mayor, I'll ask you to share your thoughts on that.
What we've done, currently, they have to, they've got to bless the course. And so they're concerned, that expressed to me about the critical area and the total watershed, but that infringing on developers, contractors, landowners. That's going to limit their capacity to develop land as they see fit. But I also want to make sure that the county board and these developers are aware of what the restrictions are, the exceptions are, special density permits they can get. And I'm not sure, I don't know, but
Based on what I see here, there's a counter to every one of those
objections.
objections.
Yes, sir, there is.
You know, and so,
Well, we have to make sure they're informed, to make sure they know that they should know without insulting, obviously. And then educate them and know it, and then be able to counter objections.
but I mean, they basically have to decide to put this on their agenda. We can't, they have to decide to put it on their agenda.
What they've indicated to me is that we could present our case before them in a closed session. County closed session. But then I want to make sure that there was, Tuesday was, evening was bandied about, but I don't think we've got enough to go forward right now. There's too many questions. And I wanted to do it right, and I want to do it one time. And I want to be able to answer all their major questions and objections at that time, not to, well, I'll find out if they come back. So I want to under promise and over deliver in this case. It's very, very important we get it done right first time.
I want to say this is something I really care about personally, and I've spent a lot of time the last 2 weeks of my life, like trying to learn everything I can, so I know what I'm talking about, and there's still a lot of questions I have. So it's important to me. The reason it's important to me is because it's not just a North Wilkesboro thing. I love this town, and it's where I'm from, and that's where I'm working, but I believe this is a Wilkes County thing. You can even look at the number of meters that we already serve is, you know, almost 10-1, not quite by today's numbers in the county versus town. But also this goes to the future security and strength of Wilkes County. This goes to opportunity that could be created for business or industry for Wilkes County. And I believe this is a Wilkes County issue. I believe it's a large sweeping generational issue that goes to Wilkes County. And I believe that the people of Wilkes County deserve a fair discussion on it that's based on facts and it's based on reality and not fears, myths, or preconceived notions. And I believe that as a board, we need to make sure, like Mark's saying, we get our stuff right and we present it to the board, but we also present it through our media channels and let people know what's going on. Because I've had some calls from people that are smart people that are concerned about things, and when I explain it to them, they're not concerned anymore. And I think there's just a lot of misunderstandings. And I also would like to point out that, you know, when they came up with these restrictions, if you will, for the watersheds, I think the deadline was like January 1st, 1994, that municipalities and counties had to have their ordinances in place. And the Wilkesboro intake off the Yadkin, that watershed that you can see on this map right here, is already is a class 4, which is the same as what we're asking for. And if you think about Walmart and 421 corridor, now some of that was built before then, but there has been a lot built after that. And that is the most highly developed area in Wilkes County. So I'm open to hearing from developers and everybody to hear their side of it, because I want to hear all angles and I'll be open-minded. But I just want everybody to keep in mind that the most developed area in our county is this same restriction that we're asking for. And if you look at the size of it, this is a much smaller piece of land. And at the end of the day, we're gonna have to weigh off, are these restrictions worth the extra water capacity for our county for generations to come? And that's what this conversation is really about, and I hope we can move it forward.
Well done, Mr. Palmer, and also I'd like to recognize Mr. Palmer for all his work and research and pertinent questions that he asked. And thank Mr. Cooper and his staff for answering those questions.
One more piece of information I'd like to provide, just for the board's edification, is that I've mentioned to a couple of you all before that, we could time the implementation of the regulations and the reclass, so it's not to add the burden onto folks right away. And I still think we can do that, but the watershed ordinance has to be extended and in place for 270 days, so for about 3/4 of a year, before the reclassification can take place. So we want to find out our proposed date for when our intake will come online and start counting backwards and figure out when the watershed restrictions would need to go into effect. But it wouldn't need to be right away, is what I'm saying.
Anything else before we move on?
Yes, traffic calming. I told you I had a long manager's report tonight. So I want to say thanks to you all for those of you who came to our traffic calming session earlier this month. We were very pleased with the turnout and with the information that we got. And you all heard folks' argument. And so I know that you've got a sense of what the sort of consensus of the community was. But I'll say that the impression I got was that, there were probably 50 people there and there were probably 50 different opinions. And that there isn't much consensus. Everyone thinks that a different method is the best method. But the purpose of the meeting wasn't to find a solution, but to just take people's temperature on possible solutions. And once we've taken that temperature, the staff considers that alongside technical requirements, best practices, the efficacy of the measures, and the cost information for each one to come up with a recommendation. And so now that we've received the feedback from the community, oh, by the way, I want to add that some of the information we received, some of the feedback we received was that we don't need to do anymore. That the traffic issue is okay the way it is. So, but when we consider all this together and ponder it in this way, staff have done that, and we've come up with the following recommendations on paths forward. The first is reinstalling the speed bumps on Finley Avenue, which we've already started to do. We've got 2 of the 3 sets up. We're waiting for special order hardware in order to establish the 3rd set, install the 3rd set, and that hardware is in transit. So hopefully every day we'll get that in and we can go and install the 3rd bump. We recommend installing speed bumps on 6th Street. Our measurement and the feedback that we got from the community is that there is a problem on 6th Street that's acute, and that the speed bumps work and are the least objectionable. So I'm not saying everyone likes speed bumps, but I'm saying that they're the least objectionable to people. So right now, what staff is doing is we're figuring out precisely where they'll go. And it seems like an easy question to answer, but it's not, because 6th Street really isn't a perfect candidate for speed bumps. For example, the best practice is to put a mid-block. But if you put a mid-block on 6th Street, you're either competing with someone's driveway, an alley, or a steep grade. And so we can't follow the best practice there. We thought about putting them closer to the intersections with E and F streets. But you can't put them too close, because then you impinge on people turning off those streets. When you turn off a street, you need to be able to accelerate and clear the lane. And so if you've got a speed bump right there, that prevents you from accelerating and getting out of the way. So there's no perfect place to install them there, but we've been working on that recently, and there's actually some speed bumps out there, or some cones out there now, designating where our current best guess is as to where they should go. So if you're curious, go out there and look. But once we've decided we'll call a contractor and have them come and install, in this case, the asphalt speed bumps. We're gonna do permanent ones there. With that said, the asphalt can't be installed in the cold, so the contractor has recommended to us that we wait till the weather's a little warmer. And so it'll be at least mid-March before we get those installed on the ground on 6th Street. Okay, Chief Thornburg.
So I say wonderful, that you got a time frame of ballpark date for installation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Chief Thornburg is creating a staffing plan that increases the presence of officers on the grid streets. And this will be finalized in the months to come. We'll bring that to you. But that plan working is contingent on him being fully staffed. He's got a couple of vacancies right now. So once he's fully staffed, he'll be able to implement this plan. He's currently got a temporary traffic officer out there now who, what'd you say, Chief, is out there every other day patrolling the grid?
4 days a week. He's working 10 hours a day. And, it'll be Monday through Friday, and we'll be alternating days, 4 days a week apart. And that's contingent on people getting COVID and different things, so we may have to pull that officer back and put it back on the shift. Just depending on shortages and things like that, but for right now, his focus is traffic.
Very good.
And what you mean, Chief, is he may be out there anytime.
He can be out there
He may be
anytime.
right
He can be
now.
out there anytime, so.
You never know.
And the other officers are still writing tickets as well, but his focus is writing tickets, slowing cars down in the grid. So the other officers are gonna be doing it
Main
as
Street of the
well.
grid.
I'm sorry?
You consider Main Street part of the grid?
Yes, Main Street is part of what we've got in that assignment.
All right, and the last thing that I recommend that we do for this phase of the traffic calming work is, you guys have heard me say it. What's the first question I ask often? There's uncertainty about something. What's the policy? To create a policy. And the reason why I think we need to do this is because, we did these last projects sort of ad hoc, and I think we could have done them more efficiently and more transparently. And a policy enables us to do that. And so staff have already started working on it. We'll bring it to you in the months to come to help us make decisions on the areas that need decisions made. But the purpose of the policy will be to, one, set standards for what streets are even eligible for traffic calming. So it's a little more complicated than this, but here's an example. Your dead-end street that gets 2 cars a day, probably not eligible for any traffic calming. So it'll set eligibility standards. After that, it'll set a process for requesting a traffic calming measure, and it'll set the process for how we evaluate that. Now, I just want to let you know that when we go out there, we're going to be looking at a lot of factors. We're going to be looking at things like the density around the street, the geometric features of the street, whether there's pedestrian activity or bicycle activity along the street. Of course, the speed and volume of the cars. And a number of other factors. So even if we go out there and measure, there's still going to be a lot of variables that we have to consider. And then the policy will finally establish how a project that passes all those standards gets funded. And we'll need you all's feedback on what you want to do with regard to funding. You want to give us a little pot of money every year that we can use on traffic calming projects? Do you want to include each of them on a case? Do you want to consider each of them on a case-by-case basis? How do you want us to establish funding for those projects? And so this policy will be intended to answer all those questions. And then from that point on, all traffic calming issues will be governed by that rather than just us going out and doing studies and projects ad hoc. And that way, having a policy will be more transparent because folks will know what the criteria are, and it'll be here when we're all gone. Be able to help responsibly govern the provision of traffic calming things after we're gone. So that's my recommendation for staff's work going forward on this matter. I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments.
Absolutely.
My only concern is with the speed bumps on the hill on Sixth Street, particularly if it was pavement. Is there anywhere where there's speed bumps on the hill so we can see how that's gonna work? Because I feel like if you do pavement, you can't really move them and stuff like it could be other ones if it was weird.
So the best example of the type of speed bumps that we're gonna include there is Westwood Hills in Wilkesboro. And there are a few of those that are on the slight grade. They're not on a significant grade. There are a few of them that are on a slight grade there. And so if you want to go see about what the scale of the bumps and so forth is going to look like, go right over there.
You plow with them, so.
Carefully. Yeah.
Off the blade.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that came up out of that traffic thing that I still think is a reasonable idea to look at is North Wilkesboro has one lone stoplight. I understand that it has a bit of expense or cost to continue to operate. It's at the intersection of Finley Avenue and Henshaw. One of the things that I talked to David about was that it was originally proposed a roundabout there. I don't like the roundabout idea because I just don't like the roundabout thing, but I
Others
think,
didn't like that.
I think removing that stoplight that we have, it costs us money. Removing the yield entryway onto Finley Avenue from Henshaw and just creating a radius that would allow trucks to turn. I think just converting that intersection back, since it is, and I use this term, turn it into a four-way stop. But I'm just going to remind everyone, it's already got a traffic control system on it. So it's not like we're creating some nightmare again by putting in a four-way stop. But I think that might be, because that would discourage people coming Henshaw and carrying that speed through that arc right on Finley Avenue. So just something to possibly look at. And I think that's a project that we could do internally without having to solicit, a lot of, I don't think it would be a horrendously expensive project just to remove that stoplight system and put in a four-way and remove that swing arm, that swing ramp.
Yes, sir. We've been talking about that. So that's on our plate.
That night, we had the meeting, there was one of the neighbors, most of the people there at the meeting was like my neighbor. That's what they were talking about, that intersection down there. They like to see the light go away.
It's an awkward intersection, particularly if you're coming from my house going towards like McDonald's. Like you get out there, the people here, they always start stopping, you're stopped and stop. Because you're going straight and they're curving into you, but I feel like they should probably yield, but they don't. I think a four-way would be probably safer.
That's the only other recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
I think
Yeah, just a quick question. The speed bumps on Sixth Street, are they gonna be on the side that also going up the hill?
Yes, sir. They'll span the entire width of the road.
Okay, just, I live on a hill and listen to cars that sound like they can barely make it up the hill as is, or, maybe someone's riding a stick. Imagine them slowing down, having to accelerate to go back up that hill. I just wonder if that's gonna cause traffic issues if a car stalls out or, like I said, it has to come to a complete stop or almost a stop and then accelerate to go back up the hill. Loud cars, it's annoying to hear, and I'm just wondering if that's gonna be an issue there. Is there some way we could do it on just coming down the hill so we don't, there's a stop sign on the top of the hill now too that slows down traffic, but. Okay.
Because people,
I'll explain.
yeah, they go up to Sarah Shore.
Gotcha, okay.
But that is the downside is you take a young guy with turbo diesel, and he pulls that thing up hard, then you have people, we got speed bumps, but they don't complain about noise.
Yeah.
They will complain about.
I've got one every day about 6 o'clock on Ninth Street, the floor.
These boys got these big Dodge, these trucks,
Yeah.
they come down Main Street, they will pop it right there in front of my shop and hear the
Chief will follow
echo
up
off
with
the
the
building.
building.
They're good.
That's all I got.
Okay, so I know the proposed Smooth Park Master Plan, we covered that, or not? Okay, and we're okay on water sewer policy briefing?
No, sir, so that's a separate item, so
Okay.
that's the one we need to go to.
And I did another question.
All right, go ahead,
This
please.
is more of a statement, and I try never to interject things that aren't productive. But I feel like we are such a small town and we have such limited resources. And I feel like dedicating more resources to traffic calming. And I know this is gonna be super unpopular when I say it, and I'm sure that I'm gonna get a lot of flack from people, and I don't mean to. I live on 10th Street. It's affectionately called Roller Coaster Hill, right?
You're at the top of the hill.
Like,
there.
I have
lived there for
people that
15
like,
years.
yeah, I just feel like because we're such a small town with such limited resources and limited staff, that to continue pursuing traffic calming at the rate that we have been for the last 6 months is a misuse in their time. And also, like, you all are the guiding force. At some point, you might have to just take the flack and say, we won't do it anymore.
Yes, ma'am.
I
And-
totally agree. I'm sorry.
And I get, it is hard to have really negative feedback from constituents. I understand that, and I don't want to upset any of those constituents. I get what it's like to have people flying by your house. But at the same time, if we had a larger police department, or if we had a larger staff, I would say, let's dedicate somebody to this 100%. But because of our resources and because of what we don't have, we need to focus on what we can have. And I just think that, I'm sorry, guys, I'm sorry.
Holly, I agree with you. We've taken absolutely too long
Yeah.
to arrive at a conclusion that should have been arrived in 2 months. We've been
Yeah.
working on it a year.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if anybody's ever said that in a meeting. Maybe you guys have said it 18 times and I've just missed it, but from a constituent, I would say, you've done your due diligence. You've tried.
Yes, but if I may, just for a moment, I've been mayor for a very short time, I started attending meetings in over a year. And I've seen an inordinate amount of time spent on this issue.
Yeah,
Is it important? Absolutely. There are other issues that were just, if not more important. There's a small group. No matter what you're gonna do, it's never gonna be enough. You already indicated one issue.
Right.
It's gonna be the noise. So.
or the breakdowns.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, so I mean, we're gonna do the best we can. But we can't have a group dictate and monopolize all the other things and take away from things we really need to be working on too. We've gone, this board has gone over and above responsibilities to taking care of this issue. They've done the best they can. And I think Mr. Hooper's proposed policy is spot on, that we'll do what we can. We can't spend hours a month on this issue all the time. Getting emails now, it's never been. Because this meeting is public, it's being recorded, they can zoom in anytime. You can attend this meeting on your phone. So, but I'm retired. So say what I can, say what I believe to be true and honest, and to make a difference. And whatever you do, I'll end up saying this, whatever decision you make, I did this in business, I came from the private sector. Mr. Marshall. If you make a decision and you only have 20% of the people angry or upset with you, you're doing a good job.
You did a good job.
I'm done with that.
A few meetings ago, I said essentially the same thing. I think that we only have so much bandwidth, and I believe that we spend enough resources towards this. I hope that it really helps, because I think some people need it, but I'm ready to turn a new leaf on this. So,
And I'm gonna say that I've had more people that have approached me that are really vehemently anti-speed bumps and things like that. I've had at least a half dozen in the last few days that have been very, very vocal to me about what a detriment, and these are people that live inside, this is not people passing through, these are people that live inside the city that have expressed their displeasure with this method of doing this. So, you know, I think this is, although it's not my preferred method, I think this is a compromise, but I'm like the rest of the members of this board. We got a lot of other things that we need to focus on than this. I mean, you know, so, and people can take from that what they wish, but I'm ready for the other big projects that we have.
Thank you, Ms. Parsons.
We certainly illustrated that tonight with the Smooth Park
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah, you're right. Should we move on to item F?
Well, we still got item E too. So that's a follow-up to.
Oh, I'm sorry, you did say this was something that different.
Yes, sir. So this is a follow-up to something that the board requested we talk about a few meetings ago. And that is a review of our utility policies and perhaps changing them to make folks who live outside the town limits eligible for utility services. So before we start, I just want to make a comment that I think is important. And that is the annexation requirement that's currently in our code is the last best tool we have to increase our tax base and encourage annexation.
Say that one more time.
The last best tool we have to increase our tax base and encourage annexation. If you require hooking on to town utilities contingent on annexation, it's the only tool you have. Anyway, so I just want to put that out there for you to think about as you're considering these changes. But with that said, there are some updates you could make to the policy to permit some folks who are outside of the town limits to get town utilities and not require them to annex. It's not a common practice because, like I said, it's an important tool, but there are a few communities that do it. One that is a prominent community that just recently updated their standards is the city of Salisbury. And so the proposed language that I've included in the document here comes straight from the city of Salisbury. And it essentially says that if you are a property that meets one of these descriptions, you can hook on to municipal utilities without having to be annexed. And so for the edification of our audience, I'll read those. Public properties, properties that are part of economic development projects where the annexation requirement may deter substantial economic development as determined by the town manager. Sounds like our case. Properties with verified water supplies of unsatisfactory quality or on-site sanitary sewer systems that are a verified health hazard as demonstrated through documentation determined to be sufficient by the city. Properties where water or sewer service or both was requested and approved without a condition to petition for voluntary annexation prior to the date of the code change. Pursuant to an effective and valid contract or agreement entered into by the city prior to the date of the code change, which governs the extension of water and sewer service, or when the development of the property proposed for annexation is found to not be revenue positive based on a fiscal or operational impact analysis conducted by the city. So those would, I think, establish some reasonable guidelines that govern when properties can come into our utility system without the annexation requirements, but still require most properties to apply for annexation before they're offered our utilities. So I offer those for your thoughts and comments.
So on item D, where you're basically, the request, I read through this today and you answered one question for me by your opening statement, so I appreciate that. These exceptions in red here, these are manager decisions. Who would make exceptions decisions? I mean, who would we give that authority to? And I'm just asking, I'm not.
So that's up to you all. The city of Salisbury designated the city manager, but if you want to keep those decisions.
No, I mean, but my thing would be is that if we did do that, I think as a board, we would need to have, we would need to have policy so that you would have very clear guidelines as to when to make that exception. I still am of the opinion that, I mean, I understand about the tool, encouraging annexation. But I also do think it's still an important thing for us to do, which would allow, because to me, it's, maybe it's the cart before the horse or whatever, but I think if there's water and sewer going to people and they are currently getting that service without the fear of being annexed, that maybe at a future date, they might consider the annexation portion more readily if they're already receiving services, as opposed to holding it over their head that in order to get services, you would have to do that.
One sort of compromise perhaps for the board to consider is if you turn to the pages with the red text. Only adding the proposed addition, unless such requirement is waived pursuant to this section, to section 3, which deals only with properties outside the ETJ. If you omitted that red text from sections 1 and 2, the effect of that would be that properties within the ETJ would still have to apply for annexation. And only properties outside the ETJ, which probably aren't going to be annexed anyway, would not have to have that clause.
Makes sense. How many-
What? That's fair.
How many, do we have, I mean, I know you don't give me the exact number, but how many annexation requests are we having a year right now? Not very many.
0.5.
Yeah, and that's why I think that, I don't know how much of a tool this is. This is an odd question, but if it's, I may not say this word right, I'm sorry, I didn't finish college. But, if it's a contiguous,
Yeah.
am I saying that right?
Yeah.
If it's a contiguous property,
Uh-huh.
would it make sense that they would have to request to be annexed because they're like there? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's
That's
the
kind of what you get.
sort of compromise I just offered. And that is, yeah, it seems reasonable to ask those people to be annexed just because of their proximity and, they probably use our other services more than someone who lives distantly out in the rural area. And so we
And
have
I've
to
got one more point or question, regarding the pricing of the water would be more expensive, particularly makes sense the further somebody is away, because the higher your infrastructure cost is. And, it looks like this one document, I guess, from the school of government said that the average for, water was, 1.85 or 1.9 of more, than regular. And I see this chart of closer places, it looks like we're at 1.5, Wilkesboro is at 2. I would maybe suggest we do 1.75 or 2 for what it's worth.
I was going to recommend to the board that, I'll note that, Commissioner, but I was hoping that we could discuss that as part of our budget discussion.
Oh, okay.
And that will give staff a little time to analyze how much extra revenue, 1.75 or 2, which,
Yeah.
and that I think would be informative for the budget discussion.
Very good.
So I think the action here is do we call for a public hearing on these changes, or do we kind of sharpen our pencil and refine those 1, 2, and 3 proposed changes just to make sure they're a little more refined to our liking? I mean, you're talking about potentially putting off a public hearing from the 24th of March to sometime the second meeting in April. So, because the April 5th meeting, we're doing something else, but I mean, I like action, but I also want to make sure that we cross all our Ts and dot our Is to make sure that when we implement this, that we know fully what we are implementing so that it doesn't come back to bite us in the butt.
Excuse me, Commissioner, I did not hear consensus on the board about whether to extend utilities to all properties outside or just the ones outside the ETJ.
Well, and that's what I mean. I haven't heard that either. So that, I mean, your action, we had an action potential tonight and it doesn't sound to me like there's consensus enough to call for that action.
I think I'm totally okay with the ones outside the ETJ. I'm pretty open-minded about a lot of it because I tend to, and I mean, that this is accurate, but to some degree, look at the water sewer side of the town's budget and funds as a separate business almost, so to speak, as the other infrastructure. I just want to make sure if we do this, that our rates are high enough that, 50 years down the road, we can pay to replace and maintain the lines that you've got going.
We continue this at the budget meeting, Mr.
So we continue the rate discussion at the budget meeting, but the policy matter, I think we got to decide before that.
Got
So,
it?
so how about this? So how about I go back and I pull a little bit more information about, pull a little bit more information about the importance of the annexation requirement and what the consequences could be of extending, of essentially giving up your last best hope for annexing property in your ETJ. And just bring a little bit more information back about the importance of the tool and let you all weigh that against your desire to extend this service to folks outside the town.
Okay.
That sound okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think, I hear, Wilson, that, those first two, item 1 and item 2, I don't know. The ETJ, that's, I don't mind having potential ability to waive something in the ETJ if the action was worked. I mean, that's just kind of my thought is that I would, because our ETJ is what, a mile outside?
Yeah.
And I would hate to think that something wasn't done because in order for them to buy water sewer, they had to be annexed, even though they're in our ETJ. I would hate for us, that to be the reason that they just don't want to be in town. I'm still not completely sold that the ETJ hookup and annexation. I still think that's, I think we need to be a little more open there. But that's just my thoughts.
All right.
I am but one.
I got one question for him particularly. What about ones in ETJ that make a touch out of the borders? What do you think?
They would be covered by provision.
That's the contingency.
That'd be part of provision 2. They cover that.
So you're talking about in the ETJ for contingency to the town boundary, not having that provision, then if they touch the actual corporate limit boundary,
Which have to annex or no?
that's, I mean, that's to me, if they're right next to the town,
I feel like they should cover that.
I don't know what you think. I know this is a thing that it's crossed your path.
Yeah, well, and it's, I did, and you're this, but, yeah, okay, but, both of us on the board. You're on the board, yeah. And I think you, but he, I don't care. It's, I want him people to, we've got people who do, and here's stuff, you know, the computer, it's huge. Out of that stuff. What you're saying is you want people to get the services that they're. That's right, and do it, and get them high, get them right.
So,
And so you know it's catchy.
So I will say that the more permissive, yeah, so you got it. So the more permissive you allow your connections policy to be, the higher you've got to go on the rate. Because if you're never gonna get them in to your tax base, you gotta make money to support the infrastructure another way.
I agree with
So,
that.
yeah, you gotta make
That's
it.
what you and I were talking about. Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but when the infrastructure that's going to their houses is coming from the water sewer fund anyway, right? There would be nothing coming from the general fund.
But the general fund supports the water sewer fund in other ways. So I'll give you an example. My work supporting the water sewer fund, Connie's work supporting the water sewer fund, Trish's work supporting the water sewer fund, all the administration of the water sewer fund is subsidized by the taxpayers of North Wilkesboro.
Okay.
You contribute us to the outside ratepayers. And so that's one way the general fund supports the water sewer fund. The other way is just our good credit and our credit worthiness, although it's not technically part of the water sewer fund's credit worthiness, it helps their reputation.
Yeah.
And so although we don't pay money from the general fund into the water sewer fund, the general fund supports it in other ways.
So do we have three questions? One is if they're out of the ETJ, do they have to be annexed in? Two, if they're in the ETJ, do they have to be annexed in? And three, if they're contingent in the town borders, do they have to be annexed in? Is that the three questions we need to figure out?
Essentially, yes.
Can we answer that tonight or do we need one?
I think we ought to provide service to them and not have to worry about annex.
What about, my only question for y'all is, if they touch the town borders, should we make those people?
No. I live 2 miles out and I'm on water. I should be able to buy it. I gotta pay to connect and all that, no problem. If it's in my stuff, yeah, if there is.
I see both sides of it. I'm like 50-50. That's why I'm looking at them like, which they decide.
Well, so it sounds like folks want to think about it some more.
Yeah.
We'll come back and.
I really would like to know, your statement about a little more research on that annexation tool, because when I started this whole conversation about this, it was the fact that I, like Andrew, looking at it as a business and looking at potential growth, without necessarily holding that club above someone's head. And so my original thought was no annexation, just if they're willing to pay for the service, if they're willing to pay for the hookup, and we've got infrastructure that's in close enough proximity that it all makes it financially viable, then yeah, I thought it was the right thing to do. But then again, you've raised a point. So do come back and inform me why annexation is still something good to have on the books or not. Because like I said, my original thought on this has always been those three things. If it's someone's willing to pay for it, if the infrastructure exists, and then just let's, it should be available.
We've done that with annexation and we've held the feet to the fire. When we've done annexation, and even in the last few years, we've held their feet to the fire. You have to annex in property tax, or property taxes. And that's part of our income. So we need to weigh that.
Yeah.
And look at it very carefully.
Yeah. Right. And give them time.
For the people outside of our.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
ETJ now.
Can I ask a question?
Quick.
So if they pay for the hookup, right? And then they pay for the cost of the service, do those dollars and only those dollars go for the salaries of the staff that
It goes back to
so
the
my
enterprise.
taxpayer dollars pay for those things, but they're still getting the benefit of it?
Yeah, but they would be paying a higher rate.
They would be paying a higher rate to offset what I'm paying as a tax.
Yeah.
That's what I was just, I didn't,
No,
Yeah.
75% of them.
Yeah.
okay, that's what, I didn't understand that. I just wanted to be clear.
But now, Holly, their payment for their service does not go in our general fund. It would go into the enterprise fund.
Okay, that's what,
So
that's
it's
where.
not coming back into the general fund. So in theory, your
My
tax dollar
dollars.
paying for the administration of the enterprise
Right.
fund. But they would be paying a higher rate, which in theory, makes the enterprise fund a healthier fund.
Yeah.
But the administrative part, those of us in this room would be paying that.
I'm actually okay with it. I was just curious and I like to have everything on the.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay.
We'll come back, we'll bring that back.
All right, and then we go, item F, corridor overlay signs, text amendment, dispatch.
Jason and Chantel are here to give you a good overview at the beginning. And essentially, what we have found is our corridor overlay, which is a overlay district on top of your other zoning jurisdiction or zoning districts, is very restrictive for signs. You're only allowed to have monument signs or ground monumented signs. And like you mentioned, you're putting them in the parking lot, you're having to navigate a very large DOT right of way. And it's becoming very restrictive for some of the business owners of 421 or Statesville or Sparta. And we don't permit any other signage. So having a wall sign negates the right of way issues, the parking lot issues. And it still is aesthetically pleasing versus some of the other signs, which is why the corridor overlay district was originally designed to be implemented. So with this text amendment, we would allow both monument and wall signs. And we do have to change a number of sections of our zoning ordinance to do that. But it's a fairly simple text amendment to give businesses more options for advertising on their property. So for tonight's purposes, if you like what you see in your text, essentially, we would call for a public hearing to be on March 24th to change that language. So then businesses could have either or signs that on their properties in those regions.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, and the planning board voted this unanimously.
Yes.
And
I saw that.
I am very excited about your business, by the way. I have.
The only thing I want to know,
staff
is see what
very
sign will
excited,
look like.
So, welcome to North
Yes,
Wilkesboro.
we're glad you're here.
We're glad you're here. You put your sign up, but I do want to see what it looks like.
Mr. Mayor, I make a
Yeah,
motion to
come on
call
back.
for a public hearing
I'll
on
defer you.
the corridor overlay sign text amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Count second. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I've got one comment. Thank you all for sitting through this. I know you're probably bored out of your mind. We appreciate it. Is there anything we can do, like if somebody comes or something like this, that we can move it to the top of the agenda?
Yeah, we should, I didn't know they were gonna be.
Apologize.
Apologies.
I learned more about the town in the last.
Hey, here you
couple years.
Education was worth the wait.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
Well, I got one question. Are you processing meat?
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear.
Are y'all processing meat?
Not yet, we will be, we're still in our NC Ag Department inspection stages, we're hoping to do like a grand opening at the beginning of April.
But what you're saying is if I kill a deer in 6 months, you will process it.
I got you,
That's my question.
yes.
Okay, I'm
So-
not trying to.
During the correct regulated seasons, we'll do all wild game processing as well.
That's great.
It's gotta be in season.
It's gotta be in season.
See, I knew he was a trick.
You have tags.
He's gotta have tag.
Yes,
So I can't club one out of my yard and bring it in.
you can if you got a game warden that'll write your receipt for it.
Matter of fact, I may hit one going home tonight. It's a good possibility.
If they keep eating my budgets, my wife might be out there wrestling one down.
When they do your darn.
All right, folks, anything else?
You got emergency issues?
I do, but I'm not, no, I'm done. Not tonight.
You good? Yeah. I'll need a motion to adjourn, please.
So move, Mr. Durham.
And I'll need a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you very much, folks.